I wanted to start at the most darkest moment, which I assumed was when you went into cardiac arrest. But you corrected me and you said, no, that wasn't the darkest moment. Go ahead and explain what you mean.
When I was coming out of surgery and I had had 8 cardiac arrests during surgery, I had been put into the intensive care unit. I was intubated, meaning I had a tube that helped me breathe. I was drugged to keep me from fighting the ventilator. And at that point, the doctors didn't believe I had any brain left because of my 8 cardiac arrests. And so I couldn't see people, but I could hear them, and I could hear them talking about my case. And I remember thinking, I'm here. Yet they were not talking about my case as if I was present. It was more as if I was gone. I was brain dead.
Patrice, we know each other well. We're going to skip right to it. I just said a few minutes ago before I hit the record button that I wanted to start at the most darkest moment, which I assumed was when you went into cardiac arrest. But you corrected me and you said, no, that wasn't the darkest moment. Go ahead and explain what you mean.
Well, when I was coming out of surgery and I had had 8 cardiac arrests during surgery, I had been put into the intensive care unit. I was intubated, meaning I had a tube that helped me breathe. I was drugged to keep me from fighting the ventilator. And at that point, the doctors didn't believe I had any brain left because of my 8 cardiac arrests. And so they were lightening my drugs to do a neurological exam. And as I was coming out of that fog, I was trying to figure out why I was in the position that I was in and putting the pieces together, because there were certainly parts of the time period that just got lost, and trying to put it all back together was quite difficult. At this point, I can't speak because I have the tube down my throat. I'm trying to figure out why I have that. I can't see. And it's an interesting thing during all of this and all the damage that was done coming out of the anesthesia and in my time in the ICU. I had a very difficult time seeing. And so I couldn't see people, but I could hear them, and I could hear them talking about my case. And I remember thinking, I'm here. And yet they were not talking about my case as if I was present. It was more as if I was gone. I was brain dead. And they asked me at one point, Patrice, if you can hear us, give us a sign. And I gave them a thumbs up. They went out to my family, and from their report they said, we can't explain it. She's awake and responding. And so previous to this, they had said I'd have an hour.
Oh my goodness. So they saw the thumbs up, and you probably, because of the condition you just explained, you probably couldn't really tell what happened after that, because you couldn't see. You could hear, but you couldn't communicate, with your mouth anyway, with your words. You just sensed that they left the room. Or you put this together?
They started chuckling.
Oh, okay.
They started chuckling. And later, one of the doctors told me, yes, I asked him about it, and he said, yes, we were laughing because you gave us the sign. And I said, I gave you the sign? Like I flipped you off? That would be so unlike me. And he said, no, you gave us a thumbs up. And I thought, oh, thank goodness, I didn't lose my mind. But I could hear movement of people and hear them leaving. But I didn't hear what they said to the waiting room of my family and friends. That's reported to me from them. But they had just told my family and friends that I wouldn't make it through the next hour, that I wouldn't survive, and that if I did, I would have no brain function. So for me to hear them and respond in a positive sense to a directive was a big deal. It meant that I had brain function, which they didn't expect. They not only expected me not to respond at all, they expected me to not respond correctly if I could.
Now, Patrice, you said that you had died or were dying through cardiac arrest 8 different times. You just explained kind of what was going on, which is pretty amazing and kind of a shocking way to start a podcast. Why don't we back up? What led you to this situation where you were in a hospital and there was all kinds of work being done on you, around you, a lot of confusion? What led up to this? What was it, and what led up to it?
I had a rare ulcer in my colon, and I had been on some medications for psoriatic arthritis that had created a backup in my system. This ulcer tore open and emptied the contents of my bowel into my peritoneal cavity and to my thoracic cavity. So stomach area, so abdominal area, and the lung area. And for anyone that has that, it's life-threatening. They count the hours, and it's roughly about 6 hours before they say your chances of survival are slim to none. And from the surgeon's reports, I went in through the ER with intense abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, couldn't stand upright. They ran some scans. They decided it was small bowel, and they let me sit for 24 hours. Well, Rob and I, my husband, begged for a surgical evaluation, and we didn't get it. They documented it in the record that we requested it, but they kept implying that there was no need. And I remember standing there and thinking, is this a trick? Which way am I supposed to go? And then I would start again all of a sudden running. And I think it was the dreams, and I had it over and over and over. I think it was during my cardiac arrest, when I was arrested, I was coming to the path and a fork in the road where I could choose to stop fighting or I could fight on. But there was no picture down that misty, murky side of if I fought on, what that would look like. Or I could just let go and be done with this earthly fight right now and let go. And at least in my mind during that time when I would come to this, I truly thought, which way am I supposed to go? I'm not sure. And I'm such a fighter to begin with. I think one, I was necessitated successfully, partly because of my body's fight to survive and my will to survive. But once I would be resuscitated, I was pulled out of that. And I was only going back into it when I was back on death's door.
You know, that's pretty consistent, I think, with what God has given us. I think a lot of folks don't realize that they do have a lot of authority. God has given us a lot of authority. He's given us the ability to make good decisions, bad decisions, etc. There will come a day, of course, when we'll get to go into rest, as we say. But that seems very consistent. Thank you for sharing that. That's reassuring. You know, there's a couple other things I want to make sure that we talk about. That and I'm gonna say them now. One is, let's talk about the aftermath of what you've been through, because we haven't yet told the listeners about that. And then secondly, let's talk about the how are you dealing with it? How are those you love dealing with it? Call it PTSD versus resilience. Let's talk about those things. But before we jump into that part, so what has happened since then? You said you were in the hospital for 38 days.
Mhm.
Did that include physical therapy, or
No.
where do we go from there? Okay.
No, they wanted to send me to a rehab facility.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, COVID was increasing again.
Mm.
And if I went into a rehab facility, I was not allowed to have any family members with me. So I asked them, I said, what happens if I have another flash pulmonary edema? What is your team going to do? I can hardly even speak. I can't speak during that time. I can hit a button. And even then, I can't hit a button well because my hands were dead. And I used my elbow to hit a button that they put on my bed. It's a special call button. And they said, well, we'll send someone in and then we'll send you back to the ER. And I said, okay, so what's the difference between me being at home where my loved ones will see it immediately and take me to the ER versus being in a facility that's a rehab facility and you guys might get to me quickly, you might not.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and on top of that, what are you going to teach me? I can't use my hands. I couldn't use my hands to pick up a cup. I couldn't use my hands to feed myself, brush my teeth, wash my hair, go to the bathroom, any of that. And I couldn't walk. And I hadn't been out of the bed for 33 days when they were talking to me. I had not been out once.
Did you know what was coming?
The rehab?
Yeah. Did you know what was, you said that your hands were dead and you couldn't walk. Did you know what was coming?
I did. I've worked in hospitals enough to know that the types of drugs that they had used had killed my extremities. And at one point I overheard a doctor or two clinicians talking. I assume it was doctor or nurse at the time. And the gal says she doesn't know yet. And of course, my response is, what don't I know?
Oh, yeah, right.
Tell me. Right. And so the doctor came over and it was the ICU doctor. And he said, you have damage in your extremities and you're going to lose some or part of your hands and feet. And I said, okay. And I knew very well what that meant, but I also knew logically why they did it and what it was providing me, which was my brain and my life. And at one point, one of my doctors asked me, do you feel depressed? Do you feel upset about this? And I said, well, I don't feel depressed. If you ask me, would I like to keep my hands and feet? The answer is absolutely yes. Mm-hmm. But if you had woken me up and said, okay, would you like to keep your brain or your hands and feet? No pun intended, hands down, I would have said, I'll take my brain. And so there's trade-off. And in this case, functional life, which to me includes my brain function more than my hand and foot function, I would have chosen that. But so I knew I would lose parts of my arms and legs. At that point, they were talking about mid forearm and above the ankle on both feet. Loss of both arms at the mid forearm and both feet lost above the ankle. And I actually have more than that. I have no fingers or thumbs, toes. I have 5 toes left, but it's only partial toes because they've cut off from the toenail bed out and across the middle of my foot, on my left foot and both hands. But I do have my brain and I do have capability and I still have the ability to laugh and think and love. And so there's so many things that I do have. I tend to focus on what I have, not what I don't have.